Good evening, everyone. My name is Joe Tan Juan, and I am from the MBA Standard Program.
Hi, I'm Nikki Panglinan, also from the MBA Standard Program. It's nice to see you all tonight, right, Joe?
I agree, Nikki. We have quite the audience with here today, and rightfully so, because we are all witnesses to an equally big event. One that is, in fact, a part of the series of lectures we've conducted throughout the school year in commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the Ateneo Graduate School of Business.
That is correct. If I may say so myself, I think the subject of our forum today is especially relevant given the recent events.
Did you mean the earthquake last Friday, Nikki?
Yes, Joe, but also the plethora of natural and man-made events that occurred this time of the year, such as the typhoon, the monsoon season, fires, privacy breaches, and even terrorist attack. You know, these events are often causes in disruption in business operation, and it is crucial that decision makers in any organization are well equipped to manage these kinds of scenario for the business and for the affected employees as well.
Well, you are absolutely right, Nikki. I, for one, am part of the crisis response team in my organization, so I think the insights that we are all about to acquire today will be very helpful. Indeed, it is our great honor, on behalf of the Operations and Information Technology Cluster and Operations Management Class S11, to welcome you, fellow students, colleagues, members of the faculty and administration, and guests
to the AGSB 50th Anniversary Operation Management Forum, the Contingency Plan, Managing the Risk of Business Disruptions. Before we begin, we ask everyone to please rise for the invocation to be led by J.M. Ang, and to please remain standing for the Philippine National Anthem.
Let us all remember that we're in the holy presence of the Lord. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for gathering all the people today and for having us all safe here. Lord, please guide us. Please guide the speakers, all our guests, in absorbing all our knowledge and all the knowledge we will receive from our speakers. Lord, as we have this seminar, this forum, may we all remember that we are thankful to for your grace. This we ask through Christ our Lord. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen.
Mayang magiliw, kailan sa sinanganan, alam ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupig, di ka pasisiin. Sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bagaw, may nilagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang kislap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagdedingin, ang bituin na taraw niya kailan pa may magdidimin. Lupa ng araw ng malhating pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang hinigaya na pag may mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
You may now take your seats. Now, to formally open today's activity, let's welcome to the stage Dean Rudy Ang of the Ateneo Graduate School of Business to deliver the opening remarks. Let's give him a round of applause.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We'd like to thank the class that put this together, the faculty of the QMIT department, and of course our guest speakers for putting the forum together. Have you guys ever heard of the International Association of Jesuit Business Schools? Yes? No? There's an association of Jesuit business schools all over the world. And every year, the deans of these Jesuit business schools get together for a World Forum to share thoughts and ideas. In 2008, at our World Forum in India, the deans of Jesuit business schools all over the world agreed that sustainability would be our signature issue or the focus of our attentions for the next 10 years after that. All right? So this year, 2017, marked the 9th year of focusing on sustainability. And yet when we talk about sustainability from across the world, one thing became really quite clear to us, no? The view of what sustainability means is different from one part of the world to the other. So when we talk to our colleagues from the more advanced countries, their view of sustainability is about environment and protecting the environment or addressing change caused by the environment. And when we talk to our colleagues from the developing countries like the Philippines, oftentimes our view of sustainability is one of poverty and poverty alleviation. The sustainability of society depends on helping all sectors of society improve their lives. And yet, as both groups spoke with each other more and more, and you have to remember that in 2008, sustainability was not yet the buzzword that it is today. As we spoke more and more, as colleagues, faculty, administrators of the schools from all over the world continued talking about sustainability, it became more and more clear that these were just two faces of the same problem. They were not different. Because you cannot work to save the environment without helping the poor, and you cannot help the poor without addressing the questions of environment. These changes in environment affect the poor, and the way the poor live affect the environment. So sustainability is a question of bringing both of these together. In the Philippines in particular, there's an abundance of poverty which we hope to address. And there's unfortunately also an abundance of natural calamities over the years which we have to address. And so these are two things we have in abundance, which makes it, in fact, an exciting time to be a business major, because the challenges are great, and the people who are addressing them are not many. So it's a good time to be a business major. It's a time when the country needs more of us to put our skills to use in addressing the questions of sustainability. Poverty, environment, and the interaction between the two. So today's forum is especially timely for us, especially in our 50th year celebration, where we talk about leading by serving and serving by leading. And we as graduate business students and professionals were called upon to lead this effort and to serve our fellow men in this effort to address the questions of sustainability. Right? So I'm looking forward to learning a lot from the session today. I know I will learn a lot, as will you, I'm sure. And we want to thank in particular our guest speakers, but in particular our professor who will be properly introduced later, our guest speaker from Kyushu University, who flew in just to be able to join us this evening. All right? So he will be properly introduced later, and I will not steal the thunder from those introducing him. Welcome to our forum this evening, and I hope we will have a productive evening together. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Rudy Ang, for that warm and inspiring welcome message. As we moved on with the program, allow us to take this opportunity to thank our partners for working with us to make this event possible. Copico, Le Mineral, Beringer Ingallium, Sun Life Financial, Pacific Cross, Splash, Maxipil Zero, Stylex, and Aqua Verde.
We also thank the Ateneo Graduate School of Business and the Ateneo Professional Schools for their unwavering support in the organization of this event. Well, Mickey, I think we should not delay the proceedings any longer. Don't you think?
Yes, I think so, Joe. I think
Yeah.
everyone is pretty much excited of what
Yes,
our speakers
I
have to
agree.
say for
And
tonight.
I know, based on the posters and advertising materials posted on Facebook, and I'm sure you all saw them because they were everywhere on Facebook, that we have the privilege of hosting two guest speakers today.
That is correct, Joe. And our first guest speaker obtained his professional education on business continuity management from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He currently leads the Business Continuity Office of Bangko Sentral Sentral ng Pilipinas, which implements the business continuity management system of that institution. He has nearly 20 years of extensive experience in both internal and external audit, with specialization in conducting risk-based audit and assessment of information system governance, IS control, security, risk management, and business continuity management of financial institution. He is a subject matter expert on IT governance, audit, controls, risk management, and business continuity management, and has been consistently recognized by both government and private entities, including domestic and international organizations. It is my great honor to introduce our first speaker of the evening, Mr. Dickinson Africa. Let's all give him a big round of applause.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction. So thank you for having me, and I'd like to commend the Ateneo Graduate School of Business for organizing a forum such as this one. That is very well attended. So tonight I'll be discussing something that I would say relevant, not just at the corporate level, but most probably even at the personal level, how to build organizational resilience. So, well, based on the introduction, I currently head the Business Continuity Office at the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. So, in BSP, we take this seriously. So, that's why we have a full-time role for this one. So, with this, I'd like to start with the following agenda. First, of course, I'll be discussing briefly what organizational resilience is all about. And then, based on the theme provided to me by the organizers, it's about mitigating the risk of business disruptions. So basically, I'll be discussing what makes an organization resilient. And then, of course, building organizational resilience, and of course, some key takeaways. So before I start, I'd like to ask the audience, how many are you familiar with your own business continuity management? Anyone? Of course, aside from your professors, the others, some of you are taking pictures, so most probably you are tasked to write something about this one. So it's very, very predictable, right? Usual. It's very usual that students or who are asked to participate in this forum will be expected to write something regarding their learnings or key takeaways. Then, well, I'd like to start my presentation with this quote by Gary Hamel. And he said that the world is becoming turbulent faster that organizations are becoming resilient. Do you agree with this? Yes, obviously you have to, but anyway, that's the truth. That's the reality that we are facing. So what does this imply? It means that more than ever, we need to be prepared against certain contingencies. As a matter of fact, just recently, as mentioned by your MC, last Friday, we were a bit rattled by an earthquake. Some felt it, some did not. So others evacuated, others, they don't care. But anyway, so that's basically the essence of being resilient. Then some statistics, based on the Alliance Risk Barometer. Every year they publish this article, the business risks. For 2017, very consistent. The top business risk that most organizations are facing around the globe will be business interruption, as you can see here. Followed by market developments, cyber incidents. It's very now, of course, cyber threats are here as we speak. And then, of course, natural calamities. We are being bombarded by natural calamities. As mentioned by some of our counterparts in other central banks in Asia, we are known exporters of typhoons. So they are quite glad that the Philippines is there, strategically located, because we already absorbed the typhoon before it reaches their place. So, well, that's quite sad. Then another one would be macroeconomic developments, fire explosion, political risks and incidents, loss of reputation or value, and even new technologies are considered disruptive events. But come to think of it, if you're going to analyze the top 10 business risks, some of the items here are also contributory to this one. Let's say, for example, you're talking about cyber incidents, natural catastrophes, fire explosion, sometimes to a certain extent, political risks and violence. That also leads to what? Loss of reputation or brand value. So at this point, no, I'm pretty sure that some of you already recognize the value of being organizationally resilient. Then if part of the study showed that around the world, no, the respondents to the survey disclosed that, like in Canada, so the top risk for them is, again, business interruption. Same thing with the US, no, France, Spain, no, and then Italy, and then what else? Australia, no, and even Singapore. No? Some, although they did not mention explicitly business interruption, some are contributory to business interruption, like cyber incidents, no? For South Africa, UK, and even Germany. Then, there are certain risks that also lead to business interruption, one of which is, of course, technology risk, like hacking or denial of service attacks, systems failure. I'm sure you're quite familiar with ransomware, no? that paralyzed some institutions abroad, no? Like the WannaCry and even the Petya ransomware, right? Then, of course, advances in digital technology threatening the business model, no? As shown in the previous slide, on the number 10 will be new technologies, no? Which are also considered as disruptive. Then data theft, no? By third parties, ransomware. Recently, right, HBO, no, was hacked, no? The hackers are demanding some sort of ransom, diba? Otherwise, they will publish the Game of Thrones episodes, no? Which some of you may be very eager to know, no? So they're looking for download links, right? Then data theft by staff, no? Theft by intellectual property, business interruption, so on and so forth, no? There's also the supply chain risks, no? Especially for the other sectors, not just the financial services, no? This is particularly true for manufacturing, wherein the company is very much dependent on key suppliers. But even for service-oriented institutions like banks, no, we also depend on some suppliers. The suppliers of technology, the suppliers of people, they're also part of the supply chain. And of course, there's the regulatory and compliance risk, no? Especially, again, no, in the case of the Philippines, the financial services industry, particularly the banking sector, is very highly regulated. That's why, as I was speaking to some of your professors earlier, when it comes to maturity levels, no, the banking sector, I would say, is one of the most matured industry with respect to business continuity management. Because one, it is regulated by us, by the Bangko Sentral. We require them to circulars to have business continuity management. And as a matter of fact, we recently released Circular 951 for this purpose. Then, here are some facts that we need to consider. One, of course, the organizations cannot fully anticipate all causes of business interruptions. Anyone who's into risk management here? Anyone whose role is into risk management? So, aside from your professors again, no? So, I guess not. No? Why am I asking this? If you happen to be a risk manager, basically you will agree with me if I would say that you cannot anticipate all risks. It's quite impossible and even impractical to a certain extent to anticipate all risks, right? And then, but you can take steps to minimize impacts of business disruptions. Because business disruption is considered one of the many risks, no? Particularly in operational risk management. And then, of course, one best option is to have an agile business continuity management program. So what do we mean by this? First, we need to be organizationally resilient. So this is quite different from BCM, or business continuity management. Well, pardon the definition here, but just to put everybody in the right context, when we talk about organizational resilience, it's about the ability of an organization to what? First, anticipate, prepare for. I guess this is the most important part. You cannot be resilient unless you prepare for something, and respond and adapt to incremental change and sudden disruptions in order to survive and prosper. So basically, you know, if you, what it means here is that for companies that fail to survive any disastrous interruption, most probably, you know, they will be having hard time, you know, going back in business. Then, the resiliency levels, so this is some sort of an evolution. Before, no, we just talk about DR, or disaster recovery. In the context of business continuity management, or even organizational resiliency, whenever we mention the term DR, it only means restoration of your IT services. Nothing more. No? Nothing more. It has to be supported by a business case. That's why this is more important, no? The business continuity. Because without business, there will be no use for IT, right? So IT is really, while it is known as an enabler, in this particular context, it is a critical support function. And other than that, there has to be organizational resilience. This is a higher level of maturity, right now, because it does not only involve your own business, but you also have to take into consideration as part of your preparation your key stakeholders, which are both internal or external. Now, to expound further, what are the key principles for organizational resiliency? One, of course, there has to be a shared purpose and vision. Before you embark on this, you may want to ask yourselves, why are we existing in the first place? You have to go back to your company vision and mission. What do you intend to accomplish? Why do you exist in the first place? Where do you intend to go? Then at the same time, effective management and governance. So this is very, very critical because you cannot implement something unless you have management support. Then you need to understand also the changing internal and external context. I'm not so sure if some of you are familiar when this particular concept came into the picture in the Philippines. Anyone who would like to make a wild guess? When did we start gaining consciousness about this concept of business continuity? It started as early as 2001, after the 9/11 incident. After the terrorist attack in 9/11, that brought down the World Trade Center, companies here in the Philippines started to gain consciousness about the relevance of BCM. And this is where the BSP started issuing regulations requiring banks to have business continuity plans, to test their plans at least once a year, so on and so forth, to have an alternate site. That was 16 years ago. But of course, the environment has changed. Before, companies are planning for terrorist attacks. Until quite recently, we are gaining, the plans of the companies have evolved from preparing against terrorist attacks to preparing against climate change to preparing against pandemic. And we were joking about it earlier, companies sometimes are now preparing for what? For the absence or unavailability of Uber, Diba? Because transportation has been, public transport has been really a challenge for some companies, especially those who are very much dependent on manpower, like the BPO industry, right? So another one, of course, will be adaptive capacity. So what do we mean by adaptive capacity? It means that the ability of the organization to respond to the changes here, as we have identified in the environment. In BCM practice, we cannot say that our level of preparations is enough. Maybe for now, but not in the next few years. So because of the changing environment, we also need to adapt to these changes by boosting our internal capacity, strengthening or improving our linkages with our stakeholders, particularly the external ones, because we have talked about supply chain risks earlier. Then another one will be the diversity of skills, leadership, knowledge, and experience. What I've learned with this role, I've been doing this since 2009. What I've learned here is that one critical success factor for implementation is having the diversity of skills and experience. Because disruptive events do not occur like in a very predictable fashion. Yes, for some like natural calamities, but for the others, it requires some degree of skills, leadership, and even experience to know what to do to have an effective course of action. And then, of course, coordination across management disciplines. Basically, BCM work entails coordination across different stakeholders, whether internal or external. You have to work, you need to collaborate with different parties to make sure that you can have organizational resilience. Now, other than that, of course, the key attributes, of course, is to have effective and empowered leaders. Meaning, there has to be empowerment. If you're talking about an organizational structure like a department, people within that, key decision makers within that particular department should be empowered in case of a disruption. They should know what to do. They should be given the decision-making authority Otherwise, though, if they always look up to the top management for decisions, I don't think that's not going to happen. One thing I learned, though, in my course of my experience and studies, that during disruptions, don't ask management what to do. You have to be prepared to tell them or propose to them what to do. No? Otherwise, the question will be thrown back to you. Ano gagawin natin? No? Then, creating a culture of resilience. This takes time, of course. No? Rome wasn't built in a day. So, it's a continuous process. No? So, one key element here is the level of awareness that you provide to your stakeholders. No? And then, of course, there should be what? Sharing of information and knowledge. As I have said, one of the key principles there is diversity of skills. No? So you need to have some information sharing. No? And resource availability. For some of you who's familiar with your BCPs or business continuity plans. No? Once you get to read those plans, those things will not enough unless what? Oh, okay. You provide some sort of a support. No? Resource allocation is very important. Then, of course, there's understanding the context of the organization. As I've mentioned in the previous slide, coordination of management disciplines. Continual improvement is also important because, like I've said, it's an evolution. What applies years ago will not necessarily be applicable in the next few years. So there's a need for continual improvement and anticipation in managing change. Now, here's some of the things that we need to know, no, with respect to in order for us to be organizationally resilient. No? So I'll just go about this briefly. No? When you talk about governance, again, there has to be top management commitment and support. In our case, no, for the case of the BSP, we have a board-level approved framework, set of policies to be used as basis for implementation. And even the resource allocation, no, was approved by top management. So we invest heavily on IT infrastructure, we invest heavily on people, on training, skills development, so on and so forth. Then of course we have the policies, resiliency strategies, that's part of my role, to propose to top management appropriate resiliency strategies. What do we do? How do we protect ourselves against unavailability of manpower, unavailability of facilities, unavailability of infrastructure? Then, of course, no, management reviews. No, part of the policy entails the review of top management with regards to the level of implementation that we have made. Then, again, resource and budget. No, that would enable us to acquire the necessary infrastructure, facilities, tools, and even intellectual development, no, training capacity, competency, and capability building. Now, with respect to frameworks and practices, one thing that I would strongly advise is to adopt certain standards, no? Because this will guide your implementation. With respect to business continuity management, we have what we call the ISO 22301, no? The Organizational Resiliency Standard. Then, to supplement that, we also have guidelines issued by various professional bodies like the Business Continuity Institute, no, in the United Kingdom, and the DRII, no, the Disaster Recovery Institute International from the US. Then, I also advise to have what? Resiliency plans and procedures, like document your plan, business continuity plans, and disaster recovery plans, supported by various things like the business impact analysis and risk assessments. You need to test whatever you have and review, no? Update or maintain, no? So that there will be continual improvement. Then there's another thing called, these are all synonymous to each other, no? The EMPs, Emergency Management Plan, Incident Management, or even Crisis Management Plan. No? They're just labeled differently, but basically they're all the same. Now, what's the difference between this one and this one? This one talks about life safety, life and property safety. Like what you experienced last Friday, did you evacuate? I'm pretty sure, no, you're not here, no. Probably some of you are working, no, in your offices. But for those of you who evacuated, this is basically the implementation of what you have here. Hindi pa siya business continuity. It's basically emergency management, incident management, or crisis management. The priority here is to save lives. Now, what happens during a disaster? How do you rehabilitate your business? This is where your BCP will come in. And then, of course, communications plan is important. How do you communicate with your customers, with your employees, with your suppliers, no? In case something happens to your organization? Who's in charge of communicating or giving information to the public? This is where your communications plan will come in, your media management will come in, your PR will come in. And then, of course, adherence to best practices. You can also benchmark with other institutions, not necessarily within the same industry, mind you. And then, comparing industry practices. Then, as far as organization structure, you may want to ask yourselves, with regards to business continuity management system, who's in charge of leading your BCMS in your organization? Well, it depends. Some companies consider this as part of the risk management. Some are with compliance. Some, like us, a dedicated function. And what will be the role of your different business units and even the reporting lines and responsibilities. In our case, my office directly reports to the Deputy Governor for the resource management. So that corresponds to the Chief Operating Officer in a private enterprise. Then I also have reporting lines to the Governor and to a certain extent even to the board. Then with respect to roles and responsibilities, I would strongly propose that this should be defined properly, like what will be the role of top management before, during, and after a disruption, responders and business continuity managers, business units and owners, external parties, what will be the role of your vendors, suppliers, or even key customers. Your auditors, your friendly auditors, then, so I always get that, we say, what do you normally tell to your auditors? Normally when they visit you, they normally tell you, we're here to help. And then how do you respond? We're glad to see you, right? Then, that's very normal, Then, of course, what will be the role of the individual employee? Then, with respect to people, there has to be skills and competencies development, especially those in charge of implementation. And then, of course, some training awareness to the general employee, Facilities. It could be in the form of an alternate site. In case your primary site becomes unavailable, where do you go? How do you resume work? So that's one of the critical aspects of preparedness. And then, of course, part of the consideration would be, of course, the availability of utilities, infrastructure, and other vital or essential resources. The things that you will need to resume business, you will have to be available elsewhere. Then with respect to ICT, the network connection, bandwidth, including redundancies, whenever we explore alternate sites, we take into consideration redundancies of different providers. And guess what? We only have two, Globe and Smart. That's it, So we take them both anyway. Then hardware, of course, you have to make sure that your hardware, whatever it is that you have in your primary site is also present in the alternate site. And the availability of your critical applications, data, and information, including your backup strategies and storage. Now we have several solutions providers that offer what? DR as a service, infrastructure as a service, cloud-based solution providers. You can also consider that, provided that it matches your risk appetite. Then when it comes to logistics and support functions, general and administrative services, they also play an important role, just in case of a disruption. If you have general services department, how can they help you? Your admin. Procurement and finance is also important. How fast can you acquire assets? Just in case there's a major breakdown in your system or your hardware, how fast can you procure or you acquire replacements? Security and HR would also play very important roles. Like what happened in Yolanda years ago, right? What's the main problem there of the business establishments? They were victimized by looters, right? If you saw in the television, right? People are looting what? Freezers, I don't know, where they intend to use that, in the absence of power. Then HR will be very, very important, especially for employee welfare. Like, I don't know where you were during Ondoy, 2009. HR played a very important role on two aspects, because some of the employees, are residing in the Marikina area, what happened to their houses? Most of their houses are being destroyed. So what will be the role of HR and finance there? Some companies approved the early release of bonuses because Ondoy happened in September, right? If you will remember that. Some companies distributed early bonuses so that employees will have funds to repair the homes. Others provided interest-free loans to the employees as part of the benefit. So that will also be helpful. And of course, building management will also be important. Especially what happened, I don't know if you observed this in your companies after an earthquake last Friday. Diba? What's the SOP typically, of their building management? They would inspect the facilities, right? They would inspect your building and say, okay, we're all safe. You can now return to work. Oh, crap. Oh, anyway, that's how it is, no? Then, of course, there's corporate communications or PR, no? Because someone has to talk to the public. So you cannot undermine the importance of corporate communications. Now, with respect to interdependencies, well, no business unit exists in a vacuum. Therefore, you have to deal with your interdependencies. They may be in the form of other business processes, external parties, again, like your vendors, service providers, even the government, whether you like it or not. These are your external parties. And, of course, your customers. And then, there has to be some communication tools and special equipment. How do you cascade information in the workplace? Some will be using automated tools, notification systems. Some will be using call trees. So it depends on what works for you. Now, I guess, I hope I didn't eat much of your time. What are some of my key takeaways? Well, one is achieving organizational resiliency requires knowledge and understanding of your organization. You cannot prepare for something that you do not understand. So that's the bottom line of this bullet. Second, it's not attained overnight. Rome wasn't built in a day. I have said that earlier. But increasing levels of maturity is doable. So you do it, even with baby steps, at least you're getting somewhere. And then there's no one-size-fits-all method of achieving organizational resilience. Shareholder involvement is always necessary. There's no such thing as off-the-shelf business continuity plan. You have to customize it according to your needs. It's not something that, like an app, you download and you install and then that's it. No, it's not. There's no one-size-fits-all. Then, I've been leaving you with two quotes. I started with a quote. I'll be leaving you with two quotes. One, we live in the midst of alarms, anxiety beclouds the future. We expect some new disaster with each newspaper we read. Right? And then, what we anticipate seldom occurs, but what we least expect generally happens. With that, thank you very much, and good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Africa, for that very informative and relevant talk. And just like what he said earlier, we cannot anticipate all the risks, but what we can do is anticipate, prepare for, respond, and adapt to incremental change. Right, Joe?
Yeah, so I think that's my key takeaway really from his talk is his definition of organizational resilience, which includes being prepared and anticipating, which I think many people still take for granted, anticipating the problems that might arise.
That is true. And don't forget, guys, that it's important that we prepare for something that we know about and make baby steps along the way. As what he said earlier, it's the maturity, as long as it's doable, that counts. All right. So before we actually go to our second speaker for tonight, we have some exciting prizes for every one of you here, especially those who came in early as 5 p.m., if I'm not mistaken, Joe. All right. So the organization of the one who organized this event for us tonight will be giving away 12 umbrellas for 12 early birds, and as well as 20 books by Don Soriano entitled Break Free. And the book is all about 8 principles to get from employee to employer in 3 years or less. Okay. So we're working on and building up the suspense in flashing the name of our winners.
And the winners...
I'm sorry, Joe, but I don't think you're a part of this. Your name won't be listed there.
Yeah, I'm not an early bird. So.
Okay.
And the winners are... not me.
There we are. So the winners for our first raffle for tonight are as follows.
So these are the winners of the 12 umbrellas. So let's just read them. Marion Joseph Islet, I think. Anna Raquel Holguin. Sherwin Sai, Sovian Villas. What's that? Oh, wow. Erleth Cuevas, Bernice Domingo, Eileen Valenzuela. What's that? What is that? Merlinda Mijares, Nadia Eduarte, Ruby Gaikwad, Michael Manzo, and April Razote. Congratulations, guys.
Congratulations, everyone.
And you may claim your prizes after the event from one of the members of the organizing class.
Okay, and if your names are not posted there, don't worry, we still have prizes for you as we go on with today's event. Oh, and for the book, here are the winners. So we have Sharon Yao, Vina Duyago, Jonah Cabana, Keen Ante, Olivia Chan, Gabriel De Juras, Jessa Dasas, Diane Estancio, Mabel Arda, and Jamie Galvez. There. Okay.
And we have more. We also have John Michael Santos, Carissa Capasha, Charles Ko, what's this? Rimsha Inayet, Julian Ko, Maria Ana Francisco, Monina De Villa, Brian Beltihar, Joseph Cruz, and Jeremy David. So those are the winners of the book Break Free by Don Soriano. So on the 8 principles to get from employee to employer in 3 years or less. But with enough of that, we'll have more raffle prizes later. I think it's time to have our second guest speaker. So our second speaker is an associate professor from the Faculty of Economics at Kyushu University. He obtained his doctorate degree in development economics from the Graduate School of International Development and Cooperation at Hiroshima University in Japan. His current research topics focus on the architectural analysis of module strategy of automakers, the evolution of supplier systems, and the development of automotive parts clusters in the Kyushu, Tohoku, and Chugoku regions in Japan. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct privilege to introduce Professor Takefumi Mokudai. So let's give him a round of applause.
Good evening. It's my great pleasure to be here tonight. And today I'd like to talk to you about the supply chain disruptions and the lessons we learned from the natural disasters. Okay. Actually, this is my second time to visit the Philippines, and about 10 years ago, I came to Manila and traveled Palawan. It's a beautiful village in northern part of Palawan, El Nido. It was beautiful. And a big surprise and good surprise, the development of Manila City, so beautiful. Lots of shopping malls and big tall buildings and skylines. It's so beautiful. I was so surprised. And we have lots in common between the Philippines and Japan. First of all, we are both island nations, and we are both pathways of typhoons. And also we have lots of earthquakes. So we have lots of earthquakes. And for the past 30 years, we have the number of devastating earthquakes. In 1995, the huge earthquake with the magnitude of 7.3 hit Kobe and killed a lot of people. And the 2011 Tohoku earthquake killed more than 20,000 people, and mainly by the tsunami. And last year, we had a series of large quakes in Kyushu area here. Actually, our university locates here, Fukuoka Prefecture, and we had an earthquake here. And this is a picture of my office taken 3 days after the 2011 earthquake. It's northern part of Japan, Sendai City. It was 2:46 p.m. on March 11 in 2011, and I was in my office. So I was in Sendai City before moving into Kyushu University in western part of Japan. But I was in the Tohoku area in 2011. And so I was in my office, and my cell phone suddenly started beeping. That's the alert sound to warn you of the possible strike of earthquake. We have that kind of system to give you alert just a couple of seconds before the earthquake hits. Then, just a couple of seconds later, it started shaking. So I held my breath and waited until it calmed down, but it didn't. The quake continued for about 6 minutes. Not the 6 seconds, 6 minutes. And so I couldn't do anything but grabbing the edge of my desk and just watch everything falling out from the bookshelves. That was the most terrifying and scary moment in my life. This picture tells a devastating power of the tsunami in 2011. There is the 3-story building on the right, and on the top of that, what you can see, car. Yes, a car was lifted by the tsunami, 30 meters high tsunami, washed away everything. You can find 1 and 2 here, and everything washed away. So the 2011 earthquake in the Tohoku area, actually this is a picture of tsunami, killed nearly 20,000 people, and nearly 2,000 and more than 2,500 people are still missing. And the economic losses are estimated to be nearly 17 trillion Japanese yen. It's a huge damage. So we believe that we are relatively well prepared for earthquakes and typhoons, but this one is totally different. This one was beyond our expectations, anticipation. So now let's talk about supply chain weaknesses we found from the earthquakes. So this is a picture of the northern part of Japan, Tohoku area. There are clusters of electronics and automotive manufacturers in this region, and many of them suffered from the earthquake in 2011. Actually, this is the nuclear plant in Fukushima. So, and they were damaged. So, and there's the Toyota plants here, 1, 2, and this is the headquarters of Toyota and Nissan and Honda. So their domestic production dropped sharply. For example, take Toyota, for example. So the earthquake hit this region March 11, and the production dropped by 54% in March, and 81% in April. So why does this happen to this Toyota Motors? So first, the supply of components stopped. A single car requires 20 to 30,000 components to build a car. So without any of these components, we can't build any cars. Second, it took Toyota a very long time to understand the overall picture of the damaged part of their supply chain. And third, it took long hours to restore the critical part of the supply chain. So let me give you one example. The Renesas Electronics is one of leading semiconductor manufacturers in Japan, and they have 17 factories, and these factories in blue stopped operation due to the earthquake in 2011. And especially the one here very close to the Fukushima nuclear plant had damaged very seriously. They produced microcomputers and application-specific ICs for major car makers and electronic manufacturers. And this is a picture of their factory. Everything destroyed. So this is so Renesas was the leading manufacturer of the automotive suppliers, many automotive suppliers. So many global car makers, including Toyota, Nissan, Honda, General Motors, and Denso, Hitachi, many car makers and tier 1 suppliers purchase semiconductors from this company. And their global market share is about 20 to 50%, depending on the product area. And so there was a kind of concentration of sources. So many car makers depended on Renesas. And Naka plant was one of the major device manufacturing factory, and they got tremendous damage. This is the one problem, concentration of sources. And the second problem is about the nature of the semiconductor manufacturing. Semiconductor industry is characterized as very capital intensive and super high precision processing industry. And their product specifications were very customer specific. So that you can't sell the product, the microcomputers for Toyota to Nissan or General Motors. They are so specific to customers. And thirdly, their production facilities and processes are also plant specific. So production process and system for one factory is different from other factories within the same group. So all these features made it extremely difficult to switch to alternate production site. So when one of their plants got shut down, maybe you're going to find alternate backup factory, but it was very difficult due to the characteristic of semiconductor manufacturing. So this was the second problem we found. difficulty to switch to alternate sources. A third problem we found was invisibility of supply chain network. So for example, take Toyota, for example, they have a good knowledge information about their suppliers. So they know everything about tier first suppliers, and tier second suppliers, and tier three suppliers. But they don't know much about tier four or tier fifth suppliers. But those fourth or fifth tier suppliers were most of them are small and damaged severely by the earthquake. So they need help from Toyota or other manufacturers, but they don't know about the damages. So the invisibility of supply chain network was the third problem we found. And so what would you do to prepare for the supply chain, the risk of, potential risk of the supply chain disruption? So one possible answer could be safety inventory. You have more inventories than you need in normal time, then maybe you can continue your business. So, so this is basically a kind of safety inventory. So the 2011 earthquake raised an argument about the effectiveness of appropriate, or the argument about the appropriate level of safety inventories, which also raised a question about the effectiveness of the lean production system or the Toyota production system, which pursues minimization of inventories. And we still have an argument about this in Japan. Should we have more safety inventories or not? So in summary, these are through this series of earthquakes, we found the following weaknesses in supply chain: the concentration of sources, the difficulty to switch to alternate or backup sources, invisibility of supply chain network, and doubts or questions against a lean production system or Toyota production system. So what can we do in the face of natural disasters? Maybe we should increase the safety inventories. Maybe we should build more quake resistant buildings, so reinforce the building codes, backup factories, or dual sourcing. Or should we change the location of factories to safer places? But this is ironical because Kyushu Island was believed to be more safer in Japan, but we had earthquake last year, so there is no safe places in Japan. This is so ironical. And should we standardize the product specifications or production processes so that we can switch our production? So let me give you another example of the Renesas Electrics. So Renesas has taken a series of actions after the 2011 earthquakes. So first of all, they reinforced the building codes. They changed the building standard. Previously, their buildings and production facilities were supposed to be able to withstand up to the intensity of lower 6 out of Japanese scale of 7, which is very strict, by the way. But after 2011, they reinforced the building codes up to the intensity of upper 6, which is equivalent to that of earthquake in 2011. Very, very strict standard. This is the first thing they did. And then they made some production sites and supply procurement strategy more redundant. So they introduced several measures. For example, in material procurement area, they increased the safety inventories with discussions with their main customers. They also did take some measures in production area. They reinforced backup production capacities. And they introduced the so-called, what they call multi-five strategy, which I explain this later. And they also introduced a alternate production in case of disaster. And in sales and logistics area, they disclose all information about the supply chain. So if they suffered from the serious damage of the earthquakes or typhoons, they disclose such information to their customers, so that their customers can judge if they can switch their supplier from Renesas to other competitors. So this is a negative information for Renesas, but they decided to disclose this kind of information in order, in the light of the customer's benefit. And they believe that this kind of information disclosure will increase the trustworthiness of their, as a supplier of semiconductor. So this is a multi-five strategy. Previously, they depend more on the single-site production because of the nature of the semiconductor industry. So very capital intensive. So economies of scale is massive in this industry. So there's no reason to split the production volume. But they, after the 2011 earthquake, they introduced a so-called multi-fab strategy. So more, for example, the microcomputers made in Naka plant here, this one, is also able to be produced both in Shiga factory and here Ehime factories. So major products are always available to be produced more than two or more factories. This is the multi-fab strategy. And this is the progress of the multi-fab strategy. So these are products, and these are products made more than two or more factories at the moment. So all these efforts by Renesas was tested last year when another earthquake hit Kumamoto area. And this is a Kumamoto castle, by the way, and the other huge landslide. I don't know what happened to the driver of this car, but I was lucky. So the scale of the earthquake was magnitude 7.3, very massive. And more than 200 people died, unfortunately. And economic losses is estimated to be 2.4 to 4.6 trillion Japanese yen. So it's a very, very devastating earthquake. So this is a map of Kyushu Island. So here I live here around here. And Kyushu University is about here. It's very northern part of the Kyushu Island. And here, Renesas has one plant very close to the core of the earthquake last year. And as you can see, there are a lot of car manufacturers and electronics manufacturers too. For example, here, Hoya is one of the leading optical product manufacturer in Japan. And here, this is what happened to Renesas Electrics. When the earthquake hit this island, it was April 14th. They have damaged on some critical materials, but their buildings and facilities were okay, thanks to the reinforced building codes. So this enabled them to restart their operation within 1 week. So they partially restart their operation, and after 1 month, they have recovered their production to the 100% level. On the other hand, the Hoya factory, the optical product factory, they produced a photomask for semiconductors. Their factory was seriously damaged, and their factory caught fire due to the earthquake, and they were not able to restore their factory, and they had to make a very hard call to shut down their production function. So they have production functions and R&D functions, so their R&D functions still in operation, but they shut down the production of facilities. So they were not able to restart their production. Let me talk to you about another example from the automotive industry. Aishin Kyushu is one of group companies of Toyota Motors. They produce a lot of automotive components, like some parts for seats, door lock, power sliding door parts, and sunroof, and door check. And their main customers are car makers inside Island, and they also ship their products to headquarters of Toyota Motors. But earthquake happened, and they had to stop the operation and they can deliver their products. Especially this product, door check, account for about 95% of the Toyota's domestic production. So 95% cars produced in Toyota use this component. So Toyota had to stop their factory, most of their factories, until the beginning of May. So this is what happened after earthquake happened. So when the earthquake hit the Aishin Kyushu company, AIK for short, it was 9 to 6 p.m. At night, and employees immediately stopped the operation and evacuated by following the action protocols. So within half an hour, everyone evacuated, so everyone was safe. And they do security inspection and start gathering information about the damages of the building. And on the other hand, their parent company locates here at very center of Japan. It's about 600 meters away from the Kyushu. And this is then after knowing about the earthquake, senior executives and senior managers and engineers spontaneously assembled to the headquarters office then within half an hour, and start gathering information about the damages, and they made a plan what to do. Then about 1 a.m. on the next day, actually a few hours later, they launched the Quake Response Task Force in Kumamoto here and Aichi headquarters, and they discussed what to do. And this picture illustrates the damages of the AIK plant. Here, this is the inner wall of the factory. They collapsed completely, and I don't know, I'm not sure if you can see this. There's the stamping dies. This is a rack of stamping die, and they dropped off. They are so big and heavy and dropped off here too. And the cranes also fallen off and smashed the head of stamping machine. Here, a pair of dies stuck inside a pressing machine and unable to be removed. And here you can see a destroyed vibration isolator. So this is supposed to work to mitigate the shock of shake, but they cannot stand for the energy of the earthquake. So after examining the damages, they concluded that it is unrealistic to restore and fix this factory, and within affordable period of time. So they decided to transfer everything out of this factory to other locations to reopen the operation. So they selected 14 locations to produce their products and continue their continue with their responsibility to supply their products to Toyota. So they use their supplier database to select alternate production sites. And this database includes all information about their suppliers. For example, all materials, components, or devices and processes that are involved in each of their products. So they can trace every information of each of the products to in-house process, tier first, tier second, tier third, and up to tier 10th layers. And so they know which supplier involved in which process or which components very precisely. So they also know the production capacities and their locations, their technologies. So based on this database, they select the alternate production sites very quickly. And one of the toughest challenges for them to make the alternate production work was the logistics. And this was very, very challenging and very important. And so the inbound and outbound logistics of the alternate production sites was very complicated. And this slide shows the previous one. The original logistics chain was very simple. This network connecting number of customers inside the island, and also the customers outside of the island. Very simple logistics network. But after they selected and established the alternate production sites, there are 7 in Kyushu Island, another 7 in mainland of Japan. And so this is a simulation of logistic network, and the production site got spread in 14 plants. So parts, materials, and finished goods would come in, go out, respectively. The logistic network was expected to be very tangled up like spaghetti. So after days of analysis and discussion, they elaborated the so-called hub and spoke system. Hub and spoke. So they launched logistics hubs, or connecting points, here, here, and here. And they once collect the all goods to the hub and connect the hubs with the fully loaded trucks. And this redesign of logistics made them possible to implement the alternate production. And I'll just go this very quickly. So this describes how the production goes. The bottom is the AIK production, and the top is the production at the alternate sites. So when the earthquake hit, they stopped the operation, and just in 2 days they made a decision to switch to the alternate production sites. And they brought everything out of the factory to the alternate production site. And as early as April 23rd, they set up the production. They reassembled the old facilities and tools and remade a production line. And they did quality inspection very quickly and gained approval from their customer car makers, and start the operation. Then in 4 months, they fixed everything in their original location in Kyushu Island. Then they returned back everything to their factory. So conclusion. So what can we do in preparation of natural disasters? Safety inventory, or quake-resistant buildings, or backup factories, or dual sourcing, transfer your factories to more safer location, or standardization of products or production process, maybe, but each of these items will be half measures. It wouldn't work if they work independently. So for example, if you increase safety inventories without knowing the entire supply chain, that will kill your business before the next earthquake hit. So this is lower the operational effectiveness. So this is a kind of a suicide. So these measures have to work together as a system. So this slide summarizes system of measures for natural disasters. So a resilient supply chain will consist of 4 stages. Here, analysis, before, after, measures, before, after. So the first stage is ex-ante analysis of proactive measures. So you can anticipate these problems and you can take actions before something happens. Risk analysis or supply chain visibility is part of them. And disaster mitigation, including quake-resistant building codes or facilities, and safety inventories, and supply chain redundancy. This means you have a redundant or multi-fab strategy. You have 2 or more sources. And you can go counterclockwise like this. So the second stage is the execution of business continuity plan. So you can anticipate and prepare what to do before the natural disaster hit. Then execute. So initial response have to be coordinated before something happens. Otherwise, production or supply chain will become chaos. And action protocols also have to be set up before something happens. And supply chain diagnosis and supply chain restoration is included. But sometimes, or very often, in many cases, you'll face unanticipated events or challenges. So you have to make a quick call, spontaneous decisions. So this is a response to unanticipated events, but this have to be, but we want to reduce this part because this makes us very chaotic. And the final stage is the learning process or reflection of our experiences. So documentation of process and this is very important to prepare for the next natural disaster. So documentation, and you have passed your knowledge on the next generations. And this presentation is one of such attempts. And last but not least, I'd like to emphasize the importance of people and mutual trust. Without dedication and contributions by their employees, either Renesas or the Aishin Kyushu, where they wouldn't have achieved the quick restoration from the natural disasters. In order to restore the Renesas Naka plant, their people worked 24 hours, 9 days a week, and they received the full support from their customers, suppliers, construction workers, and local and central governments. And so they received the maximum of about 2,500 engineers gathered from all over Japan a day. And by the June 2011, the total number of engineers dispatched to this factory was 80,000 people involved in the restoration of the Naka plant, the semiconductor factory. And in the case of the AIK, the Aishin Kyushu, after they stopped the operation, they helped local community first before fixing their own factories. But actually they had nothing to do until the headquarters office sent their rescue team, but they helped local community to handle the relief supplies coming from all over Japan because they have a lot of knowledge about the logistics. And there were no opportunistic behaviors from inside and outside of the company. When the AIK asked help from their competing part suppliers, those competitors were willing to offer them a support, and they gave space for alternate production without asking extra rent. So all efforts to restore the supply chain disruption in the face of natural disaster were made possible with dedication by people and the mutual trust in the community. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor. That was a really enlightening talk. I think my key takeaway from Professor Mukudai's presentation was that there will be times when disruptive events can be unprecedented. So we cannot anticipate that everything will happen. We cannot plan for everything to happen because sometimes things will occur unexpectedly. So I think the steps that he outlined are general steps that can be customizable depending on the type of organization that you have. He gave real-life examples from real-life organizations in Japan, and I think it is very relevant for us to understand those examples too, especially in our context because we have very similar situations here with regards to the types of events that might happen in our country as well. So, what do you think?
That is right, Joe. And as mentioned by Professor Mokode, we are actually the exporter of earthquakes. But what I really like about his talk earlier is the integration of the multi-fab strategy, wherein he mentioned that actually having multiple sites production is one way to actually sustain our business. And not only that, by ending it as well with the collaboration of people and mutual trust and teaching the younger generations of what we know now based from the 4 factors that he mentioned, I think is really my key takeaway from the session.
Yeah, that's true. I agree that you mentioned people and mutual trust. So again, very important component of any organization and operations.
That is true. So I know, guys, that you are learning a lot from our 2 speakers. But before anything else, I think it's the time of the day again, Joe. We're going to announce one winner from our audience this evening.
Yeah, so it's time for another raffle. And I think our prize this time is
a power bank.
A power bank.
Yes.
And there will be one winner of a power bank. And okay, so the winners are pre-drawn, by the way, so we're not just identifying people we know.
Yes.
So, okay, so the pre-drawn winner of the power bank, congratulations to Jacqueline de Mesa.
Yes.
Yeah, so you may claim your prize later after the event from the organizing class.
Okay. For those whose names weren't called yet, I believe we still have 2 more.
That is true, and I think
more
we can
raffles.
mention what the prize is going to be. So, our other prizes include. Okay, so the next raffle to be drawn will be a resort accommodation for 2 in Aqua Verde Beach Resort. So we will announce the winner for that later.
Yes, and our last giveaway for tonight is actually a JBL Bluetooth speaker.
Yeah, so we're going to announce winners for those later.
Yes.
A spoiler alert, I won. I'm just kidding.
I don't think your name would be drawn
Yeah,
on the list.
I don't
though.
think I will be drawn. So anyway, let's move on. So,
Okay, yes. So at this point in the forum, we would like to introduce our panel of reactors who will share commentaries and further insights based on the lecture of our guest speaker.
So our first reactor is currently the consulting leader for global technology services in the ASEAN region for IBM, the most recent milestone of a distinguished career in the technology services industry. So let us all welcome Mr. Mel Cabodil.
Yan. Hello. Good evening, everybody. Okay, I'd rather stand up. You know, it's quite difficult for me to sit down. Baka hindi nyo na makita. Right, so it's a good venue. When I was invited to talk about this topic, I was in this practice since 2005. I am the president of Business Continuity Managers Association of the Philippines. I worked with IBM this is the third time that I returned to IBM. I work with Symantec, those Norton antivirus software, and I also work with Microsoft. I was the consulting practice manager of Microsoft for 5 years, and I decided to come back to the Philippines to rejoin IBM, and of course revitalize Business Continuity Managers Association of the Philippines. When I was invited by Ateneo to talk about managing business disruptions, I was saying, wow, Ateneo Graduate School of Business is already talking about business continuity. It's either it's a good news or it's a bad news. It's a bad news, perhaps, but because we have two speakers here, and I'm sure Dick Africa, who's my former colleague in BCMAP, he was a former director, he probably told you about the risks and threats in the Philippines. If there's one thing that we're always hitting the chart, it's we're always always in top 5 in terms of disaster threat, no matter what survey, whether it's United Nations or even Billboard. We're always in the top 5. The challenge is, how do we mitigate? How do we plan for it? Professor, our colleague from Japan was saying there's a lot of things that we can learn from Japan. Indeed, yes, we do have a lot of things to learn, and sometimes we envy the things that they can do from a resiliency perspective, right? However, in our own little way in the Philippines, there's a lot of things that we can do. In the session earlier, I'm sure Dick probably talked about the standards. We talk about ISO standards for business continuity, 22301. There's also practitioner standards. There are 2 certifying bodies worldwide, one from the US, called Disaster Recovery Institute International, and one from UK, the Business Continuity Institute. If you go to Singapore, they have about 1,000 certified practitioners. If you go to Malaysia, they have about 700 certified practitioners. If you come here to the Philippines, we have 17 certified practitioners from Disaster Recovery Institute, and we have 8 from Business Continuity Institute. But I'm looking at all of you now, so I'm thinking that most would be interested to go to that process. The country needs it. The professional practices needs it. Imagine if you're a business. Professor was telling us that there's a big challenge from a supply chain perspective. And it is a big challenge, not only for the Philippines, but also for ASEAN and Asia Pacific. He's talking about those fear in the supply chain that they don't have any visibility. Some of those companies might be in Cebu. Some of those companies might be in Tacloban. Some of those companies might be in Cagayan de Oro. And we impact the supply chain. It is a big challenge for Asia-Pacific economic cooperation from a supply chain perspective. So what they did, they created their own business continuity model. 10 steps to creating a business continuity model coming from Asia-Pacific economic cooperation. And that model is based from the Sendai framework. As we all know, Sendai, Japan, also had a huge disaster a few years ago. So the United Nations, together with APEC, created a framework for Asia-Pacific. And Philippines got involved in the process. So now, organizations like PDRF is reaching out to MSMEs in the Philippines, going around the country, going to Cebu, going to Mindanao, to talk about how do we develop resiliency among the businesses that we have here in the Philippines. So my point is, it is indeed a great challenge for the Philippines in terms of business continuity. There are tools, there are standards that we can all follow. We can contribute in the process. We can participate in making sure that we have a disaster-resilient Philippines. There are a lot of forums being organized now. Ateneo is doing this session. De La Salle is doing another. UP is doing another with the help of Dr. Mahar Lagmay. They've just created the UP Disaster Resiliency Institute under the leadership of Dr. Mahar Lagmay. So if institutions like UP, De La Salle, and Ateneo is trying to contribute in this process, organizing forums, I'm sure the business community will be doing the same. You are all familiar with National Disaster Risk Reduction Management Council, and I'm sure you're all familiar that there's a law. Just before I came here, I was late because we're conducting a class for Disaster Recovery Institute for the ILG, for LGUs. And there's a lot of learning, there's a lot of things that we can actually tap from the LGUs. There's actually certain percentage of internal revenue allocation that companies around the Philippines can actually tap for training. And I'm sure most of the business community is not even aware of it. You know, we're so used of getting relief. An LGU declaring a state of calamity, and then all the relief comes in. But we are not aware that there's actually a fund that businesses, that MSMEs can tap to be able to prepare for this type of disasters. So there's a lot of things that we can do. Philippines is in the top 5, but definitely there are things that we can contribute from a business community. So I will not dwell further. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions later on in the forum. So I'll just answer all the questions later. Thank you very much, and have a good night.
Thank you, sir, for your inputs. Our second reactor is Mr. Rene Sayomeli, the president of Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation, QBO Innovation Hub, and Pacific Global One. Let's give him a round of applause.
Yeah, I think I'll speak from here because I actually have some notes in terms of the response. First of all, I want to greet one of my colleagues from Idea Space, Brenda Valerio. I hope she's topping the class. I'm sure. So you're supposed to be at the dinner tonight, di ba? But anyway, I was really impressed by both speakers tonight. And it's quite clear they have a wealth of knowledge. Mel is right in that we're one of the most disaster-prone countries in the world, and but we have, out of great tragedy comes great wisdom, and the Philippines is actually ahead in a number of areas, and that's the area particularly of private sector participation in terms of disaster resilience and response. But let me just go by speaker here because I was quite impressed with both of them. Out of, when I went to Tacloban right after Super Typhoon Haiyan, there were only 4 buildings left and standing in the city, and one of them was the Central Bank building. So, you know, I mean, they do construct, they do probably have that culture of resilience that you're talking about. And I think that's an important insight because the Japanese certainly are among the top in the world in terms of that culture of resilience. They have built it up through many years of tragedy. They had one of the worst tragedies in the world during World War II, and yet they were able to recover from that and rebuild as a nation. And that's an example to everyone that no matter how bad a tragedy can be, you can come back and you can recover. And they've used that culture of resilience to build back from the different natural catastrophes they've experienced. But going back to Take Africa, both speakers mentioned the importance of the supply chain interruption. And for companies, that's the key, as I'm sure many of you know. Whether you're a sari-sari store, whether you're Unilever, Coca-Cola, Smart, or Globe, you need that supply chain to keep going. And that's the first thing that happens during a natural or a man-made disaster. We've seen this in Tacloban, we saw it after Ondoy, and we saw it after, it's ongoing now in Marawi. in that supply chains are the first things that get disrupted. But for the companies, it's a key. Without those supply chains, you can't do business. And so that we put a lot of effort at PDRF, and a little later I'll show a few slides, into rebuilding that supply chain, into protecting it, and to ensuring that the supply chain can recover quickly. Another insight of Dick was the idea that you've got to empower leaders. And he's right, you've got to have decision makers on the spot. You cannot have, that's why we have a operations center, which I'll show. You can't have somebody there who can't make decisions. So you've got to have somebody who's either a CEO or who has access to the CEO so that decisions can be made quickly during a crisis. Otherwise, it's kind of pointless. The idea of organizational resilience is an important one. It's a new one, relatively new one, and it's one step above BCP. So I was glad to hear him talk about that, and we can discuss that perhaps a little more later. I think the key in a crisis or a catastrophe, as he said, is communicating. I'm not sure how many of you remember when Tylenol, when there's a series of poisonings, of murders actually, committed by somebody who they still have not identified. He put poison in Tylenol, and something from 6 to 8 people had died. And at the time, Johnson & Johnson faced the destruction really of its brand of Tylenol. But the CEO at the time made the decision, which is very courageous. He pulled all of the Tylenol products completely, whether they were safe or not, didn't matter, they weren't tested or not. He just pulled them completely off the markets. And the company took a big hit economically, but he saved the brand. And to this day, we still take Tylenol for all those things. And that's the reason why you have all those safety wrappers, and sometimes they're very hard to open, and even ketchup. It's because it's to protect you from somebody trying to poison us, which has happened before. But that was a gutsy decision, and that idea of being able, and he communicated it quickly, and that's the importance of leadership and of a CEO taking charge. Now, just moving on to Professor Mokudai. In Japan, they have this culture. They're able to give you about 6 seconds or more of a warning before the earthquake strikes. And so they're able to shut down the trains, which is key. I mean, if we had 6 seconds of warning, it can make all the difference in the world. It can make a difference between whether you live or die. Duck, cover, and hold, or you get to to a strong foundation behind you, or if you're lucky, you can get out of the building. But we don't have that, but they do, and their earthquakes are perhaps more frequent. In addition, what I'd like to stress, which he hadn't mentioned, is the importance they've put on pre-agreements, because in Japan, they're able to rebuild the damaged roads within 6 days, I'm told, because of these pre-agreements, that if a disaster strikes and a national road is destroyed, a private company has already been contracted previously to rebuild it. So they don't wait, they just go back and rebuild the road, and within 6 days they're able to rebuild it. Now, key insight that he had was that they even considered, one of the companies that he cited even considered competitors as a supplier, which is rare, because quite a few companies will use that opportunity to take more market share, but maybe that came from, as one of our moderators said, from that importance of people helping each other, that the companies, even though they're competitors, decided to help each other, and that they turned to their rivals as competitors. So I thought that was key. The concentration of resources insight, the fact that you've got to diversify your sources of supply, I thought that was an important insight. If you have too much inventory, you'll get killed as a business even before disaster strikes. So you really have to make a good judgment on that. And the hub and spoke system, I thought that was an interesting outline that he drew. And I think that's about it. I think we can discuss a little bit more in terms of the discussion of the speakers a little later on. At this point, I just want to show a few slides. The Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation actually changed its name from recovery to resilience because we realized that resilience is more important. It covers a bigger field. So if you could just show, I just have a few slides that I prepared. Oh, sorry, I'm the one, okay. Yeah, this just shows our board. It was formed after Typhoon Ondoy. I'm sure many of you remember. At that time, the Philippines had no Doppler radars. Today we've got 12. But it was an ordinary Saturday morning, and the people went out about their business. By the end of that Saturday, the rivers had turned to roads. I think the roads had turned to rivers. I guess I'm a little tired. But, and out of that, the president at the time, President Roy, did issue an executive order asking for a public-private sector partnership. And again, following Professor Mukudai's tone there, is that we did try to build an organization that is inclusive, that included many people and many companies that don't normally cooperate or even talk to each other. You'll see Smart and Globe, Manila and Manila Water here, and yet they're all able to gather together for a cause. And I think the important insight, as Dick mentioned, was that well, as he implied, was that the CEO sets the tone for the company. If the CEO sets the tone for a culture of resilience, the rest, everybody will follow. If he or she doesn't, then it's not going to happen. One of the things we did build after Haiyan or Yolanda was the world's first ever national disaster emergency response center. And from here, we're able to track all different types of disasters, whether volcanic eruptions, floods, earthquakes, typhoons. But in addition, we're able to track our company's assets, where are our headquarters, where are our shops, and we're able to plot this private company, our cell sites, plot this private company information on our emergency operations center. Now this next slide just shows how we've divided our 82 companies into what we call lifeline clusters. This is what we think people need to live. That's telecoms, water, power, emergency supplies, finance, and search and rescue. And you'll notice that each cluster is headed by a particular company. And we also have a coordinator from PDRF. So that's really important in terms of being able to prepare for an emergency and to respond to it. These clusters meet regularly. We've got a meeting coming up of everybody. We've got protocols in place in case a disaster strikes. If somebody needs a generator, if somebody needs fuel, if somebody needs a truck, we're able to call on all our different members. Now we decided it was important to have an interoperability between the humanitarian agencies like the United Nations and the Philippine government agencies. So you'll see a rough alignment here. All of this started after Yolanda. We learned a lot after Yolanda, but the rest of the world actually learned a lot from Yolanda as well. But you see we operate together. We're members of the UN Humanitarian Country Team, and we're members of what Mel had mentioned, the NDRMC. Oh, this slide should have been earlier. But this just shows you the assets that we can plot them, not just in Manila. The red areas are the flooding from Ondoy levels. And so you'll see that we can even plot, if your company is located on a fault or if your shops are located on a fault. Now, the importance, and I think it was the professor that mentioned this, many of the big companies are prepared, but the problem is that many big companies have outsourced their services to vendors and suppliers who are much smaller, and the last thing on their minds is disaster risk reduction or business continuity. And so we've conducted a lot of training sessions, and many of the companies have paid for their clients, for their vendors and suppliers, so that they're ready, because they know that even if the big companies are ready, if the small suppliers are not, their whole business will go down the drain. We've also tried to link together three key areas: government, private sector, and civil society in terms of this business continuity and the preparation. This is one example. Unilever paid for this program. It was run by PDRF, and it was also led by the Humanitarian Leadership Academy, which is out of London. But the idea is that Unilever paid for 1,000 small businesses to be trained in business continuity, and the deal was 500 of those had to be Unilever suppliers, but the 500 we could choose. So it was a pretty good program. This just shows you a nationwide partnership, which actually everybody's involved here: the government, PCCI, and the allotted humanitarian agencies. We have 4 thematic areas which are carried over throughout the country, and this is an ongoing process that is paid for actually both by the government and the private sector, but everybody participates here. Again, the whole idea is to make this country a safer place and a more resilient nation. Now, we've been tasked to handle to prepare the business continuity plan for a lot of the government agencies, and that's a big step for us. And it just shows that we've grown a lot as a country, because the government and the private sector and the NGOs are all working together in this task. Again, the Philippines has become the poster boy in terms of private sector disaster preparation and response. This just shows a network that was built on the PDRF model. It's supported by the UN, 3 UN agencies. It's launched at the World Humanitarian Summit in 2016 in Istanbul, Turkey. You'll see PDRF there. We actually sent people to Sri Lanka, Fiji, and Myanmar to train them in order to get their private sector to respond to and to prepare for disasters. And with that, I'd like to end. I think it's the key goal is that we want a safer world, not just for ourselves, but for our families. Thank you.
Okay, before we actually go to the next part of this program, we would like to thank Sir Meili for that very informational talk about the contingency plan that we are doing here in our country. So as promised,
Yeah, so we have another raffle, and we've mentioned that the prize is resort accommodation for 2 in Aqua Verde Beach Resort, and we have our winner.
our winner is EJ Bailon. So if you're here, you actually won yourself
Here.
a hotel accommodation good for 2. Congratulations.
Okay, so at this point, we are going to open the floor to members of the audience who have any questions or additional insights regarding the subjects that we have discussed, because, well, we have been exposed to a lot of information today, and I think you may have clarifications or questions that you may want to ask. So the moderator of our open forum is actually a distinguished member of the AGSB faculty. She is a part of the Strategic and Marketing Management Cluster and is herself a certified continuity manager. So she is an expert on this as well. So she is Vice President and Head of Business Continuity Management Division for Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation. She is also chairperson of the Business Continuity Management and Disaster Risk Management Council for the Yuchenko Group of Companies. So let's all welcome Professor Maria Victoria Castillo.
Wow. Welcome again, ma'am, Butch and Dr. Makay. Okay, sorry. Okay, so there were actually a few questions we collected from the internet and from the emails of disaster. crisis level 2. Okay. All right. So we're actually together every time there's a forum or summit. We just had a summit in Hokkaido Hotel. So I was also a moderator of a portion of that and also chairperson of the summit. Okay. This is some of the questions were already addressed in the presentations, but I recall Dr. Solidum discussing about of VBOX, discussing about was this disaster imagination, and I think that is related in this question. Everyone can answer, or few of you can answer this. How should a business determine to what extent of a disaster they should be planning for? So perhaps it pertains to planning and preparation, and to what extent should they be planning for a disaster? We can send them to a seminar of ISO 22301.
Well, if you ask me, there are two approaches. There's a pragmatic approach, and there's a theoretical approach. And theoretical approach is going through the classes. You know, ISO 22301, going to the 10 professional practices, where it starts with risk management, business impact analysis, and that's how you will reimagine or imagine the extent of the disruption. Right? But the other approach would be more pragmatic. You know, just going to the grassroots, just going to the area where there's a disaster, and really understanding what's happening to the ground. Like going to Tacloban and understanding that in Tacloban, out of the 600 registered companies, only 300 was able to register their business permit. So the impact to the business community in Tacloban is about 50%. So, and there are a lot of things that we can do on what we can learn from a Philippine perspective. Vic?
Well, in our case, the way we do it, we have a two.
It's open.
It's open.
It's already.
We have a two-prong approach. No? One, basically us as implementers, we do it in scientifically in such a way that we perform risk assessments and etc. But Mel was right in determining the appropriateness of any business continuity strategy. We have to consult those who are really involved in the business process, and that's what we normally do. Now, to answer the question, to what extent are we going to prepare? Normally, this is what we do in BSP. No, we usually encourage our stakeholders to prepare for the worst case scenario. Why? Because again, I guess maybe though it's. As a central bank, we are quite different from any private enterprise. One of our mandate, so to speak, is to support the banking sector, the banking community. And if the central bank itself cannot recover from any disruption, then how else can we support the banking community? So the last thing that we would ever want is to cause destabilization of the financial system. So that's the reason why, with respect to business continuity strategies, with respect to the investments that we put in, we take into consideration what will be the worst case scenario that we could prepare for.
Doctor Makuday?
Yes, this is a very tough question to answer, but well, the first thing, the most important thing is the awareness of the top managers. So without, as Mr. Africus mentioned in his presentation, without without the leadership of the top managers, the senior managers or operating managers can't do anything. So they are very aware. In many cases, they are very aware of the necessity of the business continuation plans or management. But without the backup from the top managers, it's impossible to prepare for the natural or man-made disasters. And the other thing is that in the manufacturing industries, many elements of business continuation plan or practices are the continuation of the normal operations. So for example, Toyota or Aishin established a very precise the supplier database. But they need this, not just for the preparing for the natural disasters, but they want to improve their supply chain in the normal time. So if you prepare for the only for natural disasters, that costs a lot. But if we can use it for normal operations, then you can, I'd say, lower the cost to prepare for the natural disaster.
Thank you, Professor. What about you, Butch?
I'll add my 2 cents worth. But, I think the key thing is to practice, practice, practice. I think that never hurts, and we have a lot of training sessions with the Philippine Volcanology Institute, preparing for earthquakes and other types of volcanic eruptions. But we also have some training sessions with Weather Philippines, so people can understand the tropical weather patterns and what's going to happen. But we also have actual exercises with the UN, which take place at Clark. And those are real-life 7-day type exercises, when people live in difficult conditions. But I agree that the leadership is important. And these days, it's hard to see what disaster is going to be, because there's such a wide range of them. I mean, to everything that we discussed, you have to think about nuclear exchange. That's also a possibility, and how do you prepare for that? How do you survive? And I think it's important to realize, for employees, the first thing they're going to worry about is their families, and I think you have to make some allowance for that. Anyway.
This is actually my question, but are you open for insurance resilience? Anyone?
Yeah,
Yes.
start. Well, I think that's very, very important. In a lot of other countries, a lot of the losses are insured, and what we're trying to do here is microinsurance, so that an organization, for example, like CARD, which has hundreds of thousands of members, can we have an agreement with them, but we haven't implemented it because of the money involved. Is that we want their members to buy microinsurance, so if anything happens, even the smaller businesses, micro businesses, will be able to recover. So it's not something that comes naturally to the culture here. I think insurance penetration is very low. It's only about 7%. And for business owners, one of the last things that they'll spend money on is insurance. They'd rather spend it on other things. So I think it's a culture that we have to learn. And even as a country, right after every time we have a disaster, Swiss Re, Munich Re, the big insurance companies come here and they want to sell the Philippines disaster insurance for $20 million. You get $200 million. In our case, it's probably a good bet that we're going to need that, but so far we haven't done it. But Mexico has done it, and other countries.
Professor?
So the question is the importance of insurance.
Are we open for insurance resilience? So are you suggesting that companies should be investing on this?
The investing in the preparation for the natural disaster, all companies? Yes, maybe in like a country like Japan, we have a lot of natural disasters, typhoons, earthquakes, and landslides, and so the ability, so the business resiliency is one of the factors for competitive advantage. So they have to be competitive, not only in cost or quality, but they have to be competitive in resiliency. Otherwise, their customers, like a Toyota, Nissan, might have damage because of the supply chain disruption. So resiliency is one of the major area to invest in. So it's very important even for small businesses.
And what matters is we recover as fast as we can. There's also another question, like how do you get approval or support from your top management? Because a lot of you are aware now that business continuity, resilience organization should be in place. Then how do we get now the approval of top management? Because there are redundancies that we have to invest in, like alternate sites, like your radios, for instance, satellite phones. These are actually investments and redundant. You don't use it more often in the business as usual. So are there some tips, because you are already experts on this, you have a wealth of experience with regard to convincing top management?
Ask them to attend forums like this. Ask the CEOs to attend forums like this. No, seriously, I think Professor Mukaday hit it right on the nail when he said that when you plan to make an investment from a resiliency perspective, look at it on how you will be able to utilize your investment in an actual operation, because then you will have the actual business benefit, even if you're not using it. It's very difficult to position business continuity as an insurance solution, right? Because we are not in that mode yet, right? Even the insurance industry is having a difficulty how to justify insurance coverage. So perhaps one of the ways to convince the CEO is to be able to come up with disaster recovery solution that you can actually use both in disaster mode and in a production mode, in an actual business mode, and try to just justify the business benefit of that solution.
I think Dick would like to answer.
The easy way, I always tell them, this is what we preach to the banks. Therefore, we must practice what we preach. Right? As regulator, we need to be an example to our regulated entities. So that's the first approach. Second, normally whenever we propose something to top management, we back it up with a thorough business case. They're very fond of that. They would always ask the basis. The cost is secondary, but the primary purpose there is, why do we need it in the first place? How is it being done with other central banks? So we perform some sort of benchmarking. So we show to them that this is based on our study. No, this is some of the practices made by other central banks, peer organizations, and even some companies who are very known to be resilient. No? So that's how we do it. No? But I guess one critical success factor here is to have a champion. No? Not necessarily at the board level, but even at the senior management level. In my case, I report directly to our deputy governor, as I've mentioned. So that corresponds to the COO of any private entity. So in BSP, when you say, well, it's the deputy governor, that's next to the governor already, you know. So she's my advocate, no. So in case we have representations for top management, so it's a very good thing that she understands the principle and the value of having this in place. No? So that helps a lot in convincing top management over this on certain matters regarding BCM.
Okay, to Professor Huday, what do you suggest? Are you going to say something here?
Okay. So one very pragmatic suggestion from me is to use your customers. So if you're B2B business, you are involved in B2B business, your customers don't want to, stop their operations. So the supply chain disruption is a problem for you, but also the problem for the customers. For Toyota, Nissan, Sony, they don't want to stop their operations. They'll use them and put pressure to your boss.
The voice of the customers. Okay, so there's another thing that I'd like to ask. What about this one? I would like to answer. If this is terrorism, I want to hide this guy. What should the CEO do when a disaster strikes? So if it is terrorism, I want to hide the CEO. And whoever asked this, maybe he's in the context of asking what should be the support of the CEO and the president of the company. In our case, like for instance, if this terrorism or something that would threaten the life of the CEO, I should hide the CEO or the dean of Ateneo, protect protect him from whatever crime, or probably keep him alive, of course. But if it is like a serious crisis, for instance, it's cybercrime, for instance, or power outage, should you be calling the CEO for such thing? Or will you be relying on the empowered people, just like in the presentations of Dick and Butch?
Maybe let me share the experiences of the Aishin Kyushu. Aishin Kyushu is one of subsidiary of Aishin Seiki companies, a big part supplier. And the CEO of Aishin, the parent company, empowered the expert of production and supply chain. So the vice president, Mr. Okabe, handled everything, and the CEO empowered and let them do what they need to do. So and the president, the CEO, well, so basically they showed their concerns, or he showed he is so he traveled all the places of the alternate production sites, and he showed he is very cared about your people, and let the vice president did handle the situation. So he basically empowered his people, who knows everything about the
president was visible at the time. Is that cultural, man? The Japanese way.
Some of the more effective business continuity plan that I've seen, the CEO is calling the shot. He's the one directing, how the situation will stabilize, and that's how you see the motivation coming from the employees. Because at the end of the day, we rely a lot on our employees. In the event of a disaster, I don't know if we can show us raise of hands here. In the event of a disaster, who among you will be here to actually recover your companies? People are saying we all need to be trained. But in reality, if disaster strikes, we may be trained, but we may not be willing. Right? So being trained is one aspect, but willingness to actually execute the plan is another. But if you see the CEO actually executing the plan and doing his role, that gives you a lot of motivation.
So motivation is the key. What about you, Butch?
Yeah, I just want to agree with that. I think the CEO, he has to take responsibility for it, because I think you have to communicate during a terrorism incident or any type of disaster, and you can't hide, and he has to go out there. He has to be able to give clear information and show his concern for the employees and for the community. I'll give you one example. Of course, you're always dealing with the lawyers, no? Because the lawyers will tell you to say as little as possible. But, for example, in Resorts World, what happened there, I think there's a lot of information that was not clear from the beginning. It took several days before we actually knew what happened. And they had their reasons, whatever happened in there. But I think that's one good case study for how not to handle a crisis.
Thank you. Resource World. Okay, so at this point, we'd like to open the questions to the audience. If you have something to clarify with our speakers here. Any questions? Are there some? So everything was taken up already? Yeah? Is there any question over there? Yes.
Hello, good evening.
Hello.
Yeah, this one is addressed to anyone of the speakers. So, like for our company, it's just a small startup company. We do not have any existing business continuity plans. So, how can I effectively convince the management to adopt one?
Okay. You want to answer? I want to answer. Be a member of BCMAP, and you'll get so much treasures with regard to your questions. Mel.
Startups, I don't believe that you do not have a business continuity plan. Even if you're a startup, I'm sure you have some form of way to be able to recover. Well, the only challenge is whether it's documented and it's being practiced. You know, a duck cover and hold is a business continuity plan for a small startup. An Excel who's got all the communication information of all your employees is a business continuity plan. So I'm sorry, but I don't believe that any of you who's planning to set up a company in the Philippines who is very, very disaster prone will come here and say, I don't have anything to protect myself. So at some form, going through working with the government, working with PDRF, we'll be able to, you would have your own form and shape of business continuity plan. You know, just by, if there's an earthquake here, I'm sure all of us will be scampering out, right? And that's, self-preservation is a business continuity plan. In one of the things that we do in business continuity practice, all the practitioners, we are encouraging them to learn how to survive, because your business depends on the business continuity practitioner. If you yourself doesn't know how to do self-preservation, then the business might be in danger. So that's one of the things that we're trying to teach business continuity practitioners today. Basic life support, CPR, all those things to make sure that we will be able to survive.
Flashlight, whistle in the bag, your meds are there, first aid kit.
May go bag ba tayo lahat?
Go bags. Okay.
So that's in a small company, if you have a go bag, then you have a business continuity plan.
Okay, thank you. Any other question? You don't have a question? You have your experts here to answer some questions or clarifications? No more? All right, so thank you very much, speakers, for this time with you. And thank you, everyone.
So thank you to our speakers and our reactors and moderator for this evening. Well, I think I speak for everyone, Joe, when I say that tonight has been very educational and enlightening for all of us today.
Yeah, you're right, Nikki. And we have all of our guests to thank for coming tonight and sharing with us another incident. So we have all of our guests to thank for coming tonight and sharing with us their expertise in the field of risk management in business.
Very true, Joe. So before we end the evening, may we call on J.M. Ang, the class president of Operation Management Class S11, Professor Gus Arguelles of the Operations and Information Technology Department, and AGSB Dean Rudy Ang to present our guest lecturers with a simple token of appreciation.
Okay, so may we call on Professor Arguelles. We have Dean Ang. Okay, so may we call on Professor Maria Victoria Castillo. Let's give her a round of applause.
May we now call on Mr. Rene Maybe in front.
Let's give Mr. Maley a round of applause, guys. May we now call on Mr. Mel Cabadillo.
May we call on one of our guest speakers for this evening, Mr. Dickinson, Africa.
Okay, now may we call on our other guest speaker, Professor Takifumi Makudai. So there you go. Okay, so thank you once again to all of our guests today for the very informative discourse that we have had this evening. So again, I think they deserve one more round of applause. Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay, so to formally close the contingency plan, the AGSB 50th Anniversary Operations Management Forum, we would like to welcome back to the stage Professor Gus Arguelles. So Professor Arguelles is the professor of Class S11 who is the organizer of this whole event that we have today.
Okay, I won't take long because I know you guys are hungry. First, I would like to thank the speakers who took time to participate in our forum, which made it successful. To Professor Makudai, who had to fly all the way from Japan, from Kyushu University to grace the occasion. Of course, I have to thank Dean Ang for making all of this possible with his support. The faculty of the cluster of the department, and of course the class itself for working very hard, taking a lot of time going around, planning, getting their plans rejected from several levels and doing it again and again until it gets to be better. I also thank, of course, all of you here who came to learn something about the Operations Forum, which has been going on. So, we pray that you have learned something that you can bring to your respective companies, to your respective workplace, because that is basically the objective of our Operations Forum, which has been going on for years. We would like to expose our students to ideas outside in the real world, and also provide the class the opportunity to practice what they have learned in operations management. That means managing a project, which is the forum. So thank you very much and good evening.
Okay, thank you, Professor Arguelles. So before we close, we have one more raffle. You remember the prize? Yes, the JBL Bluetooth speaker, but... Okay, well, we will announce it now.
Okay, the winner for our JBL Bluetooth speaker is Wency June Gaud.
Yeah, where's Wency? Congratulations! So you may claim your prize after the event. So before we end, may we request everyone to please stand and join in the singing of the Ateneo hymn, Song for Mary, because we are all Ateneans and we have to practice tradition.
Thank you, everyone, and please don't forget to accomplish the post-event evaluation form and give them to a member of the organizing class. As you exit the auditorium, refreshments are available outside for everyone. Thank you for coming here tonight and participating in the activity. See you in the next AGSB event.